All right, we are recording, so Dariana, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Dariana Mullen, and I'm the current reigning president of the game. I earned this title through a series of battles and verbal debates that took place during the quarantine period. Today, we're going to be moderating a Model UN with our current contestants of the game. So excited to have you here. We're going to be debating different topics. We're beginning today with the topic, is water wet? Now we have New Zealand, we have Clara. Clara, would you like to give a little bit of an introduction?
Wow, it is just such an honor to be meeting you, Dariana, the president of the game. You know, I'm here representing my country, my pride and joy, New Zealand. I have been born and raised here ever since I was young. I think I'm the best person to really be talking about this because I find myself spending almost every day, in the vast beauty of New Zealand's oceans, surfing, and of course, interacting with the wildlife. Here is my beloved partner, Ernie, and he's been with me, since I was very young. And I really do think that there's no other person in the world that could argue against water being wet like me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Wonderful to meet you and your tiny friend. He looks furry. Carenna, I understand that you represent Australia. Would you like to give us a little bit of an introduction about your country and your side of the argument?
Sorry, that was my kangaroo, Stevie Owen. He just got his shot, so he's making a row. I thought he was chucking Sookie to stay home from doggy daycare, but he just had to get some shots. But no, it's a delight to meet with you this Evo. I do consider myself a water expert because, as many of my YouTube subscribers know, I did have a cameo on H2O when I first moved to Australia. So I find the topic of all things water very close to my heart. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And let me just say, before we begin these discussions, I didn't win president of the game by being nice. I also didn't win it by being too rambly. Let's keep it concise. Let's keep our arguments to the point, and let's get moving forward. To begin, we're just going to do a little bit of the national anthem. Sing along if you know. Just to do quickly, put your hand on your heart. That would be lovely. Yeah. You fucking with some wet-ass pussy. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet-ass pussy. Give me everything you got for this wet-ass pussy. Now from the top, make it drop. That's some wet-ass pussy. Now get a bucket and a mop, that's some wet-ass pussy. I'm talking wop, 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 wop. That's some wet-ass pussy. Macaroni in a pot. That's some wet-ass pussy, amen. All right. Here's the format that we're gonna be going about. And listen, I'm strict, okay? I'm from the great country of the US of A. I don't like to play around. We're gonna keep our format strict. And our format is gonna be moderated time-wise by Preston Coleman, Game Daddy, but of course. We're gonna start with side one argument, side two argument, then side one rebuttal, side two rebuttal, then your final statements, all right? Game Daddy, do you have any preference about who goes first?
Let's let Carenna go first.
All right, Carenna, you may begin whenever you're ready, and Preston will start the timer.
Thank you. So I will be arguing today that water is wet. Now, rather than looking at water as a collection of molecules, in order to fully understand, we must look at water as individual hydrogen and oxygen atoms. These molecules are surrounded by more molecules of hydrogen and oxygen. Water matches this definition. Water covers more water, ergo making the latter water wet.
All right. Well, is that okay? Preston, did you get that?
I did. All good. Keep going.
Bingo righto, bingo righto. Let's go to side two argument. Clara, go right ahead.
Listen, Carenna, I don't know where you got your education from, but obviously there in Australia, you're not really thinking very well, especially, the science, that's all completely incorrect. Listen, I feel like, as its core in the dictionary, wet is defined as covered or saturated with water by another liquid. Wet is a description of things that liquid touches. Therefore, water cannot be wet because it in itself cannot be wet as it is a liquid. The same way fire burns, and you don't call fire burned, you do not call water wet. I rest my case. Thank you.
All right, let's take a little pause for rebuttals. Clara, that accent's going around the world, and I love to see it. New Zealand is a multicultural area, and I can see that your upbringing reflects it. And also, Carenna, I loved your take on going to the molecular status of the atoms themselves. Really beautiful. We love to go back. Let's head right into the rebuttals. We're going to start with Carenna going in her rebuttal to Clara's argument. You may begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So let's think about this. Water has two properties, being cohesive and adhesive. Being adhesive means that water sticks to other surfaces. Being cohesive, as we may know, means that water sticks to other water molecules. Now, the definition of being wet is being covered or saturated with water, as Clara stated. The singular... my notes, sorry. My kangaroo's jumping all over the place, God. The singular water molecule is not wet because there are no other water molecules to stick to it, righto? So, a single water molecule is not visible to the naked eye, and therefore, any visible water is wet because the water molecules are sticking to each other and being cohesive. In other words, water is covered in other water molecules, and therefore, by definition, water is wet. Thank you.
Interesting point, Carenna. Thank you for your take on that. Really interesting. I love what you're coming with. Clara, let's go to your rebuttal.
Just in here, Carenna, the science that you're using is truly offensive. Listen, we do not use that kind of logic here in New Zealand. You know, really, we like to argue our arguments with reason, not necessarily with specific facts backing them. And you know, to rebuttal, I just want to say that something is wet is to imply that wetness can be removed. You cannot remove a water molecule. If you are in the rain, you get wet, your hair gets wet, you make it dry by removing the water, and then your hair is no longer wet. You wouldn't say that the ocean is wet because it is a liquid. When the water gets on something, it becomes wet. But when water is combined with more water, you would not claim that it is wet because it is a body of water and it is a liquid. You cannot wet another thing that is already a liquid because it would be creating more liquid. Additionally, water cannot be dried. It can be absorbed, it can be evaporated, but it cannot be dried. However, something that has water on it, like a surface, can be dried. That is why when it's wet, the wet can be removed, but water cannot be dried because it is already a liquid. And you know, I feel like I've done my best to you know, convince you otherwise. And you know, I just want to ask Carenna, is your accent even real? Do you guys even talk? Because I see you talking like this on the show. You're always like, clear the condensation. It's extremely offensive. Extremely, the way you talk.
Well, Clara,
Let's keep it civil. Let's keep it civil, friends.
I just will say that, you know, at least I don't have a parrot that copies everything I say to stroke my ego. But, you know, sorry. Thank you, Madam President. I will proceed if I'm allowed with my argument.
Believe it or not, we are going to proceed to final statements. So take this as an opportunity to maybe rebut against your opponent, but also put together the final statements behind your argument that are going to make me decide whether water is or is not wet. Carenna, you may begin.
Thank you. Now, Clara, not only do we see, you know, my argument in countless examples in H2O, you know, when those mermaids are turning into fish, but George Orwell himself in his book 1984 actually quotes, "The solid world exists, its laws do not change. Stones are hard, water is wet, objects unsupported falls towards the earth's center." Now, he specifically states water is wet. Are we going to argue against George Orwell? I don't think so. Now, to continue that, the measure for how damp or wet something is how much water is actually on the surface, because water is the variable that makes something wet. It itself has to be wet to make another object wet. And so, therefore, I think that I've really precisely chalked up how water by nature is wet, and saying that anything else well, it would just be a technicality and go against, the true nature of the element. So I rest my case.
Carenna, thank you so much for your time today, for your arguments that you put together so well. I very much do appreciate it. Clara, we're going to head on over to you for you to close up your argument with a closing rebuttal towards your opponent and your final main points of your discussion. You may proceed.
Well, again, I just want to say thank you. I feel like to summarize my points, water is not wet because it in itself cannot be wet as it is a liquid. Only the things that are on a surface, the liquid on the surface is what makes something wet. Because water is part of a liquid, it cannot be in itself wet because it cannot be dried. Just like hair, just like a surface, just like how fire cannot be called burned when it is on fire. That is the same logic I am using for if water is wet, and I will stand by that until the day I die for my country, New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clara, and both of you for putting in your arguments, putting in the time, and handling this civilly. There's nothing I appreciate more than civil discourse, and also I love water. The way that it tastes is good. I think it is crisp and yummy, and whether it's wet or not, I think we can all agree nothing satisfies like water. I'm getting note from the game daddy himself that overall, the winner of this debate, he says is global warming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
keep that in mind. But I'm going to move forward. Preston, is it all right if I share my thoughts?
Of course.
All right. And my winner as well.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Well, let me just say to both of you, I really do appreciate you coming here with your time. And as president of the game, there's very little I don't have jurisdiction over, right? I think we can all refer to Scallion if there's any questions about that. But I would like to say something. I went into this discussion on the very firm stance from my experience on Twitter, the Wretched Bird app, that water was not wet. That was my idea going into here. I was like, I very much agreed with the concept that the water itself, by being on something else, makes the object what the water itself not. But Carenna, let me just say, your argument that to be wet is to be surrounded by water molecules, focusing on one water molecule itself, meaning that in fact water is wet unless it is one particular molecule, was truly fantastic. Clara, I appreciate your argument so much. For the sake of this discussion and for the sake of the facts that were presented and the chutzpah that was presented, the argument, I have to give the win to Carenna and the wonderful country and continent of Australia.
Thank you so much.
I'm so disappointed.
Oh, Clara, it was lovely discussing with you. Watch out for me on H2O. I'm in the first season. I'm back on the smoothie bar. That's me.
Fantastic. Game Daddy, what's next?